morning is Hank Ferrell. He is with the Citizens Climate Lobby. He can tell you when they meet. They've been very interested in climate and at this point the Inflation Reduction Act. Hank is originally from Richmond, Virginia. He's a Villages resident for the past 12 years. He's married to Laura for 62 years. I'm very impressed. George and I just had 51 years. He has 4 children, 6 grands, and 1 great-grand. So lots of blessings. He was educated at Virginia Tech. He has a BS in mechanical engineering. He was in the class of college era experience at Engineering Research and Development Lab for Belvoir, Virginia. He had a 42-year career, I don't know if I'm saying this right, Spruance plant of DuPont company as an engineer and engineering manager in production of nylon, Tyvek, Kevlar, Nomex, and Teflon fiber products. His primary roles in manufacturing systems and leading plant design and startup teams. He's currently active at St. Tim's Church Choir. What a wonderful thing. I've never heard your voice in that respect. Softball player and umpire. AARP tax prep. I guess you play the banjo. Gym, golf, biking, and Citizens Climate Lobby, of course. And he has a beach house at the Outer Banks, North Carolina. I'll get to know you about that. I present to you Hank Ferrell. Hank, the floor is all yours.
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Well, that's quite an introduction. I've never had that much praise before. I'll have to go home and see if it was really me. Well, thanks for having me today. It's really nice to be here. I wore my blue for you guys. Actually, don't really clap because I didn't think of that line until I was on the way over here.
Hank, may I interrupt you for a moment? We're recording. Is that okay with you?
That's fine, yeah.
Thank you. I should have asked you before. I apologize.
Right. Okay, we're going to talk about the Inflation Reduction Act today, particularly the part that has to do with climate change. I hope you won't ask me much about the inflation part of it, because I don't know much about that. In fact, most economists say that this bill has really very little to do with inflation. It just seemed to be a good name to put on it at the time. It would be a good sell. So we're going to talk a little bit about the problem, climate change. We're going to talk about the bill, what's in it, and what you might take advantage of. And then we're going to talk about what's left to be done, because it won't be enough. We'll have to do more than what this does. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. She's already told you a bunch of stuff. I am not a climate scientist. I have had this career as an engineer, and we tend to use science in the work that we do in engineering. We like facts and measurements. We like theories that are based on repeated observations and experiments. I tend to stay away from one-shot wonders, one-shot good things, one-shot exceptions. Yeah. I was telling you, I think, that we use facts and measurements in engineering. I tend to dismiss one-shot wonders, exceptions to the rule, and to dismiss conspiracy theories. I like to go with things that have been repeated experiments or observations and go from there. And the reason I mention that there are folks that want to bring up the exceptions and the little questionable science things, but I kind of stick with the things that have a lot of facts behind them. Politically, I like conservative party politics. I may not agree with all of you all in the room here, but I think we're all friends and we can all talk about facts in the same way. I like small government, free market solutions, low taxes. I like to make sure that individuals have the opportunity and the tools, the education to do for themselves, and then I expect them to do it for themselves. Except when there are problems that they can't. And I think this is one of those that the government has to step in, because individuals are not going to be able to do this on their own. The good news here is that there's not going to be a lot of impact of climate change on us in this room and in this village at this stage of our lives, okay? It's a longer range problem. It tends to get longer range attention, and that's kind of a worrisome thing. So it won't affect us much, maybe a few inconveniences, but there are folks in our lives that it could affect. This is my first great-grandchild. I now have two. Now, I don't want her to call me up 80 years from now, however they're going to do that, and say, Papa, you should have done something about this. This is why I called. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about the problem. These are some scientific reports that have come out from IPCC and NOAA. A lot of information in there. It comes up every day in the news. Well, about sea level rise and floods, droughts, fires, smoke from fires. The fires are there because it's so dry, so hot. This is a picture of a ghost forest in Hernando County. That's 2 counties away on the coast, on the west coast. These trees have died because of sea level rise and saltwater intrusion. Migration, you don't think too much about migration in terms of climate, but it is one of the factors. There's a lot of factors for migration, impressionists, but one of them is because a lot of folks in other countries are farmers. 28% of the rest of the world are farmers or support for farmers. 1% in the United States, so we don't feel this pressure as much. But when those folks lose their crops, when they lose their livelihood because of storms and droughts and floods, they're going to have to move. The Secretary General of the UN says this could be as many as 1 in 10 people. And we've got 8 billion people. Here's some pictures from Irma, one of the hurricanes we had a couple years ago. And then, of course, that's Irma, and then Ian came along later, and that hit us over on the west coast, Fort Moyer area, $100 billion worth of damage. That's a lot of money. Some folks would say that perhaps we shouldn't blame climate change on having something to do with storms. We've always had storms. Well, this plot shows that they're rising, not only in frequency, but also in severity. And that makes sense from a scientific standpoint. As you warm up the ocean, it's going to evaporate more water into the air. The air is going to swirl around and get together and cause storms. This is a similar plot showing the frequency of those storms that exceed $1 billion in damages. We're up to 20 a year now. This is the Mendenhall Glacier, what it was 75 years ago. It's gone. We've lost 90 vertical feet of glacier height in the world on average. That's 30% loss. Glaciers contain 75% of the world's fresh water. All right, this chart is a little bit too small, so I'm going to kind of blow it up one at a time. These are extremes that we've noticed and taken notice of here recently, things that have changed pretty remarkably. CO2 concentration in the air, unmatched for 2 million years. Glacial retreat, unmatched for 2,000. The last decade, that means 2010, decade from 2010 to 2019, I guess, warmer than any period for the last 125,000 years. June, July, and September of this year have set records for the highest recorded temperatures. Sea level rise fast, Summer Arctic ice coverage, smaller than any time in the last 1,000 years. The ocean is warming faster than any time since the last ice age. And the acidification is higher than it's been for 26,000 years. What happens is the CO2 gets absorbed by the ocean. That's its main sink in the natural process. And when that CO2 goes into the ocean, it turns into carbonic acid, which attacks the limestone, the shellfish, the coral, all that. Here's the plot of the temperature of the ocean's water going up over the last 40 years. This is kind of a picture map of the Caribbean Sea in red, showing the gradients of temperature. The white is the land mass, and the purple is temperatures that are greater than 90 degrees. We had one instance this past summer off the Keys where the temperature rose to 101 degrees. That's hot tub temperature. This is where all the heat is going. Most of it is actually going into the ocean, so that's probably what we ought to be worried about most. The red is the land, the blue is the sea. Not only is the sea getting most of the heat, it gets most of the CO2. So what's causing all this? Well, there are those that feel like it's just a natural thing. Temperature goes up and down, climate comes and goes. It turns out that scientists have figured out what causes temperatures in the past to go up and down. Some of it is because the sun changes its radiation on a cycle. But it's been going down since 1970. The change in the Earth's orbit causes ice ages to cycle. And we now are into a period where the ice ages are fading into a downward trend. And I can show you that. So we should be coming into a new ice age in another 50,000 years. But it's not because we're going up in temperature due to the Earth's orbit. Could it be caused by volcanoes? Volcanoes do cause a warming of the atmosphere. In some cases, it causes a cooling. It warms when it puts out CO2, but if it puts out aerosols that reflect the sun's radiation, it can cool the Earth. That happened 65 million years ago when the dinosaurs went extinct. So anyway, they figured out that the average effect of volcanoes is about 1% CO2 of what we put out from burning fossil fuels. Could it be because of El Nino? Yes. You can have a warming from El Nino as the ocean's temperatures shift their layers. But along comes another 2 or 3 years and you got an El Niño, which cools it. So these are cycles that come on a very short period of time. The law of conservation of energy says it can't really do much on the average temperature. So my conclusion is it's not nature. It's got to be something that we're doing. And what we're doing is burning fossil fuels and putting carbon dioxide out into the atmosphere. I'm going to show you a little experimental thing here. Let me explain what she's doing. She's got 2 bottles. 2 bottles. One's got regular air, and now she's creating a bottle that's got CO2 in it. She puts vinegar and bicarbonate of soda together. So the one on the left, the one on the right has the CO2 in it. And then she measures the temperature in the bottles. She turns on a heat lamp to both of them. And explains what happens when the sunlight hits the earth. Some of it is absorbed, some of it bounces off. This is a CO2 molecule, and when the heat from the earth comes back, it excites these molecules, they vibrate, they heat up, they absorb the heat, and act as a blanket on the earth. And this shows the difference in temperature, 5 degrees centigrade, for the bottle that has the CO2 in it. So we've got scientific evidence, and here's a plot of the temperature of the Earth over the past 1,000 years. You see it's gradually coming down. That's kind of an ice age effect, but it's very subtle. But in the last 150 years, since the Industrial Revolution, we start burning fossil fuels, and it's jumped up remarkably. Here's a picture of the CO2 in the atmosphere for the same period of years. Now, CO2 isn't all bad. Plants love it. If it weren't for some of it, the place would be too cold here. And so it's the excess CO2 that you have to worry about. Now, some of my friends in the villages here who feel like they're more expert at this feel like some of this data is not as good as it should be. It's got some flaws in it. Well, I don't know what they are. This is out of scientific journals. But I went and found another plot. If they weren't happy with that one, this is another plot with CO2 over 800,000 years. And you can see where it cycles up and down and averages about 200 or so. And now it's up 419, I think it is. It's a remarkable, scary kind of a shift. So there's a picture of what's going on here. The sun warms up the Earth sends infrared energy back out into space. Along the way, it meets this bunch of greenhouse gases, which absorb it and heats up the Earth, keeps it warm. Well, my worry here is that this thing that's going on with CO2 and warming of the Earth is something that's going to be maintaining itself on its own. This is a quote from Stephen Hawking, who says he worries that this may become self-sustaining if it hasn't already. And what he's talking about here is feedback loops. This is where something, a little bit of warming causes even more warming as a secondary effect. And an example of that is when the ice in the ocean up in the Arctic, when it melts, it turns into seawater, which absorbs heat. The ice had been reflecting it all along, but now when it melts a little bit, we get seawater, which absorbs more of heat, and that kind of is a cycle. There are about 6 of those same kind of cycles that are going on. So it's a serious problem. We've got to do something about it. Governments have got to get involved and make sure that this is addressed both in the state government and in the federal government. This is a problem where individuals can't solve it. It's got to be something that the government's got to get involved in. So let's talk about the IRA. This is a big step towards solution of this problem. There's lots of money in it. $370 billion, the biggest package ever been passed. It was passed last summer, August of 2022. And it has lots of money in it for consumers, for electric vehicles, solar heating. Lots of money in it for renewable energy by industry. And here's a comparison of the money that we had intended to spend with the old policy on the left for the same years going forward, 10 years going forward, about $200 or less billion per year. With the IRA plan, we plan to kind of double that or triple that. This is one of the things that CCL was involved in, is promoting the passage of this bill. There's a fee on methane. Methane is also a greenhouse gas. It can be pound for pound worse than CO2. It just doesn't last as long, and there's not as much of it, but it's a worthy target. And what this bill does is when natural gas pipelines that run crisscross the country are starting to leak, they're going to detect that from a satellite and charge the companies that run those pipelines, if they have a leak, a fee until they fix it. It turns out it's a win-win because it's better to fix the leak, save the gas, and avoid the fee. Natural climate solutions are involved and supported. This would be agricultural practices, forestry practices, planting trees. Those are all good solutions. I was in Louisiana last fall as part of a cruise down the river, and you would think, you know, cotton farms in those countries, in those states would be kind of backwards. But I was very impressed. They, instead of plowing up the ground to plant the cotton or the seeds or the seedling, it turns out that there's a lot of stored carbon in the ground, carbon dioxide. When you plow it up, it all gets released. And so what they're doing there is they're injecting it with a little machine that just makes a little hole in the ground to plant the seeds and the seedlings. I was impressed. Okay, there's a large chunk of money that's devoted to electrification on a smaller scale for disadvantaged communities, different kinds of electrification where it was heated by fossil fuels. There's money in there to convert that to electric heat. Money for the big utilities and energy companies to go green. $40 billion in tax credits for them, and $250 more billion for loans to put in green technology. It's turned out this is already starting to take off. Private companies have invested $110 billion to go along with the federal money to get this going, and it's already created 170,000 new jobs. And there's lots more in the bill with other sources of energy: hydrogen, nuclear, biodiesel, and carbon sequestration, which is trying to capture the CO2 that's in gaseous form and turn it into a rock. There are some small-scale applications of that already happening, but it's a big deal. It's an infant technology. Okay, so what has all this done for emissions? Well, you can see here a nice downward trend of emissions from the United States over the past 15 or 20 years, and the green is what's expected as a result of the IRA bill. It has a range from very optimistic to somewhat pessimistic, but it's expected to be about, on average, a 40% further reduction. Okay, what about health? Well, we've had an increase in heart conditions and deaths in the last 30 years, about 30%, due to air quality. 250,000 premature deaths, 10 million lost work days can be avoided, 60,000 fewer incidents of dementia. That becomes interesting to me as I go into that zone. On a worldwide scale, we lose 6 to 9 million people a year due to temperature-related illnesses like malaria and dengue fever. And just this past year, we saw 8 new cases of malaria in the United States. We haven't seen that for 20 years. And another 8 million people died from smog, particulates in the air. Okay, so what can you take advantage of? There's 2 ways. If you buy some of this technology, invest in green energy, it'll save you when you first buy it because you're going to get a tax credit. It also is cheaper to run. Your operating expense for running your house will be less than it would be if you had none of this technology. For instance, solar panels have come down 70% in the last 10 years. You get this tax credit, and you can actually pay back what it costs you to put that in 7 to 9 years. That's pretty attractive, even for senior folks, that maybe not 85-year-olds, but senior folks that are in their 70s can get their money back in 7 to 9 years. Electrification, weatherization, these are for folks that have furnaces or gas stoves or gas water heaters. They can get a rebate up to $4,000. And that includes the rebate for your home charging station if you have an electric car. Let's talk about electric cars. $7,500 tax credit for a new vehicle. Now they do cost more than gas cars, but the $7,500 just almost offsets it. But the real savings here is in operating costs. I figured these numbers out for my own car. I spend 17 cents a mile as a gas car. And with an electric car, it would be 6 cents. That's 1/3 the cost. And that 6 cents includes the tax, money to replace the tax that's lost for, when you go to the gas pump, you're paying a tax to maintain the roads. And so some electric vehicle detractors say, well, that's unfair to compare them because, and what I've done is taken that same amount of money that the gas people are spending and add it to the cost of running the car. That's like 2 cents a mile. There are some technical problems with batteries, but the batteries are going to get better and better as you go, as they find better materials for them, more recyclable materials. But even now, they last 16 years, which is more than the car will last, usually. Here's a picture of electric vehicle growth worldwide. China is leading the way. They're in the red. And the blue is Europe. And we're kind of like third place in the green. But it is kind of an exponential growth curve. It's coming. Europe is now at 42%. Ford and General Motors have a goal to be 100% by 2050. Tesla is very big into this. They're reducing prices on their cars left and right. Foreign companies like BMW, Honda, they're building manufacturing facilities here in the United States so that they can take advantage of the rebates. If you sell an electric car, if you buy an electric car, if it's not made in the United States, you don't get the rebate. So now they're building the plants so that it's built in the United States. And that means more jobs for us, too. General Motors is expecting all their plants to be running 100% renewables in 2 years. That's a pretty challenging number. I don't think they're going to make that amount, but at least they got a nice goal. Charging stations, everybody worries about them. How many are we going to have? Are we going to run out of charging stations? Can we get to them? Are they going to be on my track? There's 500,000 of them on the way. The IRA incentives for these, the tax breaks that they're going to get for putting these in are going to drive that. Ford is putting in 12,000 of them just this year. Here's a picture, a map of the village area where charging stations are. Each one of those little teardrops, no matter what color, is a charging station. The different colors are the different kinds of charging stations. There's 28 of them within about a 10-mile radius. Here's one right in Wildwood on 301. So anyway, that's what individuals can do, but now we got to talk about what the big guys have to do. The state has got to get involved, putting in the charging stations, the agricultural improvements, the flood walls, and the businesses and the utilities have got to put in the solar farms, the alternate energy sources. It won't do any good if we buy an electric car if the electricity is produced by burning fossil fuel. Right? So we've got to have alternative sources to go with the electrification. They got to do the grid. They got to figure out how to get the grid going. So they need to step up. And you can influence these. This is what you might be able to do. Your stockholders, your customers, and your users, your voters, get a hold of the state people and get a hold of the utilities and tell them this is what you want to see happen. You do have influence. Let's talk about what Florida's doing. Well, there's some good news and bad news in Florida about climate. We ranked 9th in available solar energy, so we got the stuff to make it happen. We got 12% of our power comes from nuclear. That's a good number. That's a pretty high number in the States. And there are lots of utilities in the States. It's like in Florida alone, there's like 18 different separate utilities that provide power to us. And they are putting in and plan to put in solar facilities. They're ramping up. We are number 2 in the nation on electric vehicles and charging stations. That's the good news. We're 45th in renewable energy. Only 5% of our energy comes from renewables. We are the 3rd worst polluter of greenhouse gases in the country. There's no wind power. There's no state requirement or incentives to do anything. We spend $5 billion a year shipping in natural gas and oil and coal to power our power plants. $5 billion a year, and we've got free sunshine, The governor has no interest in this whole program. This is, in his mind, it's got a Democratic label on it, and he's running for president. He doesn't want any labels having to do with Democrats. I don't know if you can fix that or not, but I don't. It's not a political issue. It's a scientific issue. It shouldn't be one side or the other. That really frustrates me. The governor has actually turned down almost $400 million that could be available from the IRA for these programs. He gave no explanation. The only thing we can figure is because of politics. So anyway, we need to be more proactive here in Florida. And we are the Sunshine State. We need to take advantage of it. There are some things that the IRA does not accomplish. We're short of our 2030 goal, but we can make that up with other programs. We're a long way to meet our 2050 goal, which is zero emissions. Let me show you that. This is that same plot that we had before, kind of simplified. It shows the effect in red of the IRA bill. But it's got a long way to go before we get to zero emissions. That's our commitment to the world. There's a methane fee, but there's no carbon fee. We've got to get that. And there's no resolution on the carbon border adjustment. What this is a tariff that one country can apply to the goods from another country if that country doesn't have a carbon policy, either a cap in trade or a fee or some sort of restriction on carbon. If they don't have that in their country, then the price of that goods is going to be much higher going across the world now. Europe is already well on their way. China actually has one of these carbon fee programs in place. So our goods are going to be at a disadvantage being shipped overseas. What can we do as individuals? We can encourage our Florida state representatives to get on board with this. We've got to go back to the federal government and ask for this carbon fee and border adjustment. We can tune in on several other minor climate bills. One example of this is permitting reform. Right now, in order to start a new power plant, especially a nuclear power plant, it takes us as much as 7 to 10 years just to get the permits before the first brick is laid. Other countries do it in less than 2 years. We got to get after the utilities about expanding their renewables, go to their meetings. Talk to folks, talk to your friends, talk to your adversaries, talk to your relatives. Educate yourselves and educate them. Consider these things for yourself and join us in our effort. You can get involved by signing up online or come to one of our meetings. We meet every Tuesday at the Sumter County Library there at Powell Road. And you can call one of us. You can get a hold of me after this meeting Elliot, with the hat in the back, is one of our members. Talk to him about what we can do for you and what you can do for us. So the question is, will you help? I hope so. Thanks. Now we can take questions, and that takes the mic, I think. I hope this works without feedback.
Hi, I've got a question about the charging stations. When I was in California, they had charging stations but the big bump was it took over a half hour to charge. So if you have many cars, which would be great, I couldn't see. I mean, there'd be a line waiting to get charged, and at a minimum of a half hour just to get to your next charging. Do you know anything about that, or?
That's true. It happens.
So how does that work then? If you have, I mean, look at all this with cars. What if we all need to
Well,
charge?
you gotta have multiple stations for sure, and you also have to realize that there's one down the road, or there are different places you can get charged, and you can charge it at home.
Well, right, yeah, I know you can charge at home, but if you're going on a long trip, going down 101 in California, that seemed to be an issue.
That's an aggravation, yes.
Okay.
And we may have to put up with aggravation.
Okay.
I mean, you can go into the charging station that's right next to the hotel that has a restaurant, and go get something to eat while you're charging your car. Otherwise, it's just yeah, Elliot?
There is some hope. There are at least two companies, Solid Power and Quantscape, that are developing solid-state batteries, and their testing has been very good. It's not yet available. Hopefully by 25, 26, it could be available. And with solid-state batteries, we're talking 15-minute charging. So that's a real game changer. If it's going to happen, we really have to hope that their research continues at the pace that it has been.
You know that scientists and engineers and business people are going to see problems as opportunities. Right. And they're going to work on it. It might take time.
Question?
I have limited knowledge about this, but the batteries that are developed for these electronic cars, they're mostly lithium, is that right? And there's a recycling issue, or I have mixed information about that. Could you clarify that for me, how that works?
There are lithium batteries, but the main ingredient that the environmentalists are worried about is cadmium.
Oh, okay.
Cadmium is a big issue about whether it's going to be recyclable or not. Because it tends to not degrade in the right way. So there is a recycling problem with batteries. But like I say, they already last 16 years, and so they're working on that. That'll be one of the stumbling blocks, and I believe technology will take care of that problem in time. Right now, the amount of I should show you a chart about this recycling issue. It was a picture of the amount of stuff that goes into landfill, and you got all this industrial waste, and then you got recycling and plastics, and then you got coal tar and oil and stuff, and down here on the right hand side is a little tiny speck of electric vehicle waste. It's not really a big deal.
I see. Okay, I didn't know. So.
Okay, what other question?
What do you think about the trash system that we have here compared to?
You're talking about not recycling.
Can you repeat the question for everybody?
Yeah. She's asking, what do I think about the trash system we have in the villages? At one time we separated our waste, and we were happy that they had recycling going on, and then they decided, well, that's too expensive. We're going to put it all together. That's the reason that they did it. It's expensive. What do I think about it? I think recycling should be done, but that's a very complex topic. There are problems with recycling. It's hardly economical to even do. Even the companies that are doing it are struggling to make any money at it because it's so labor intensive. You gotta have somebody on a conveyor belt that's picking this and picking that and throwing this away. And then the stuff that they even think is good, it's got stuff in it that hasn't been cleaned out, and it's a mess. And so I think theoretically we ought to be recycling, but it's got to be a market-driven decision. I think you got to have a system that can make money for somebody, or else they're not going to do it. So ideally, we should do it. Whether we can fix it.
We don't have a trash mountain anymore, compared to some of the
Yes,
roads.
that's right. Better than landfill. But it does make CO2. When you burn something, it puts out CO2. So there's one article I read that said, compared to the electricity you get from a fossil fuel power plant, a waste burning facility that does the same thing can make as much as 70% more CO2 than the fossil fuel one.
I like the things getting,
Yeah.
it just, the two of them don't.
Oh, I turned this off.
I know, but this is just, it's buzzing like a bee. I saw a couple more hands. Frank is back.
Frank, I don't need a microphone, darling. I have one right here. I thank you. I have a atomic electric golf cart. I don't drive a regular car. I was just wondering, and I never ever leave home without the battery being fully charged. But just in case, could I use those charging stations for the electric golf cart, or is it just only for the regular car? Do you know what I mean?
If you get stuck out, well, I don't know. I don't know the answer. Good
You
question.
don't know, okay.
But it depends on the plugs, You got, why don't you go down to the one on 301, that's the closest one, and see if the plug is the same as your plug.
I can't drive there. There's no golf path.
Well, see,
It's
there you
good to
go.
on.
That's another reason why you're probably not going to be able to do it.
Okay.
You
Thank
can't
you.
get to it.
We had our electric golf cart years ago run out of energy, and we hooked it up in the plug at the mail station, and that worked. Thank you, the village.
Thank you.
I remember when we made the change to, away from recycling to burning. And what we were told at the time, and it could have been a rumor, is that carbon capture was supposed to be part of the deal to reduce the emissions. Well, I don't know if it was an urban myth or if it was real.
Well, that's the technology I refer to, but it's not been developed to be commercial yet.
So it's not true that it's being used here.
It may, someday, maybe it'll happen.
I've tried, no, it's not there it is. I've tried to, Mia,
I tried to schedule Patrick, who works for our waste management system, more than once, and the last time he was officiating a wedding and he couldn't do it. So I'm still trying, and you can save that question and ask him. I offer this to you, but
I'll try it. Anyway, quick question. You mentioned 2 states don't have any wind power. Are we legislated not to have any wind turbines in Florida?
questions about me.
It just hasn't come up as far as I know.
Okay. Because
We got wind too, don't we?
we've got wind 1,000 miles on the coastline, but there's some rich people who don't want to look at them. That's what I understood is the problem.
Most of our wind comes from the politicians. I think.
No, but that might be something that we can do statewide
Yeah.
to pressure, getting wind turbines.
Do you know who your state representative is? Okay. I'm sure you know that. You can find that online. I don't know.
I had gone to a PDOA meeting at one point, and that gentleman was there speaking. And I got the impression, too, that there was some way that they were doing something so there wasn't as much CO2 going out into the air.
They have very good systems for particulates and for acid, and they run it through scrubbers. And they take most of the bad stuff out, and they have good monitoring systems and instruments to do that. They are proud of that. But CO2 is a gas. It doesn't get captured by anything. It still goes up. That's my understanding of it.
Okay. The other thing is, I have an electric car, and granted, I've only gone to Tampa, but I was able to get my car charged while I was down there. And most of the time, we just drive around here. So every other day or every third day, when I feel like it, then I just plug it in and charge it up and go on my merry way. So I don't have any concern about when I'm driving around here not having any issues.
You know, a thought on that I have. One scenario that I've heard people using is when they worry about how far they can get on a trip. And you get a huge battery in your car that weighs a lot of weight and carries a lot of energy with it. And one of the proposals is get a little car, a little electric car. Plug it into your own house, drive around. That's 95% of our driving. Now, you want to go on a trip? Rent one. Rent a gas car. That's better than, struggling with this issue of am I going to get to where I'm going to get to? That's just a thought.
Thank you for that thought, and I'll share with you, those of you who know Dee Melvin, moved to Texas. She and Ken made the trip in their electric vehicle, and she's coming to visit us next month. She'll be at next month's meeting. So remember the question about long trips, and you can run that past her. She has firsthand experience. Questions?
I'm just wondering if the villages has any plans to put in these electric stations for cars and go-karts that you would know of inside the village.
Well, you saw my map, right? What did you say? Electric charging stations?
Charging stations for cars or cars.
I don't know. Do you know, Ellie?
No, I don't.
Don't know. I think most people want to do it in their own garage.
Yeah, but sometimes you're not in your house.
Yeah.
Okay, one more? Is there? Okay.
I'm going to stay.
Okay, I've got one more question. I have a Prius hybrid, and to me that seems the best of both worlds because, as you said, driving around the villages, I don't use gas. It's always, it shows me on my monitor that I'm using just the battery. So I'm curious as to why there hasn't been more of an emphasis on hybrids versus 100% electric.
That's a baby step in my mind. In order for you to drive around on your battery, it has to be charged by an engine that uses what?
Yes, yeah,
Okay?
that's right.
Now, the next better step in my mind is to get a plug-in hybrid.
Yeah.
Okay? That way, you're not using gas. But then the bigger step is the EV. So it's a step. It's a little slow, and it's a little incremental, but yes, that's better than nothing.
We bought a Ford hybrid, and that system recharges itself. So we went from paying $60 a month for gas around here down to $15. And it's not burning up battery. It's because it's being recharged by braking. They've got a system now that everything is great. It recharges. Covers that. Do you know about that?
Yeah, but that's, It's true, and as long as you got a lower bill, that's fine. But the energy to run your car has got to start with gas. You are burning gas. And all I'm saying is, we got to get away from burning fossil
But
fuels.
it's a nice step.
It is a good step.
You know, on the way to being fully electric.
Thank you for your interest. Let's give Hank that.